When 8-year-old Leo's teacher, Ms. Albright, let him stay in her classroom for 2 hours after school every single day, she had no idea who his father was. She was just being kind. She saw a quiet boy who needed a safe place to wait, and she offered it without a second thought. But that simple, consistent act of kindness for a little boy triggered a deep, protective instinct in his father, a man known to the world as Styx, the president of the Iron Herald's motorcycle club. It set off a chain of events that would turn a quiet Teacher Appreciation Day into a thundering spectacle of leather, chrome, and overwhelming gratitude, forever changing the teacher's life and proving that sometimes the most fearsome-looking angels ride on 2 wheels. Northwood Elementary was a place of predictable rhythms. The morning bell was a sharp, cheerful command, followed by the thunder of small feet on linoleum floors. The air smelled of chalk dust, floor wax, and the faint, sweet scent of graham crackers. Afternoons were quieter, ending with the sigh of the final bell and the rush of children spilling out into the sunshine, their laughter echoing across the blacktop. It was a world of scraped knees, brightly colored backpacks, and earnest, hopeful faces. It was a world that felt a million miles away from the one Styx inhabited. Styx, born Michael Carter 42 years ago, was Leo's father. He was a mountain of a man, forged by 2 tours with the Marines and hardened by a life that had taken more than it had given. His arms, thick as tree limbs, were a tapestry of ink, telling stories of brotherhood, loss, and loyalty to the Iron Herald's MC. His beard was shot through with gray, his eyes the color of a stormy sky, and his voice was a low rumble that could silence a rowdy bar with a single word. He was the president of his chapter, a leader of men who lived by a code stricter than any law on the books. But at his core, Styx was just a father, a single father. He had lost his wife Sarah to a sudden illness 4 years prior, a blow that had nearly shattered his formidable strength. He was left with their son Leo, a quiet, sensitive boy with his mother's wide, curious eyes. Suddenly, Styx's world wasn't about long rides and club business. It was about packing lunches, checking homework, and battling the tangles in Leo's fine brown hair. He loved his son with a ferocity that was absolute, a silent, burning promise he'd made to Sarah to protect their boy at all costs. The greatest challenge was time. Styx owned a small but busy auto repair shop, the kind of place that kept honest hours and did honest work. But honest work demanded long hours. His day started before the sun was up and often didn't end until well after it had set. School let out at 3 o'clock sharp. His shop, wrestling with a backlog of transmissions and engine rebuilds, couldn't close before 5. That 2-hour gap was a chasm of anxiety in his daily life. He had tried everything. After-school programs were full, with waiting lists a year long. Babysitters were expensive and unreliable. His brothers in the club had offered to help, but their lives were just as chaotic as his own. More than once, he had been forced to leave Leo with the school secretary, a stern woman who made her disapproval clear with every tick of the clock. The guilt gnawed at him, a constant dull ache in his chest. He felt like he was failing his son, failing Sarah's memory. Then came Ms. Albright. She was in her late 20s, new to the school, with a tireless energy and a smile that seemed to genuinely reach her eyes. She was Leo's 3rd-grade teacher. During a parent-teacher conference, Styx, feeling awkward and out of place in the small classroom chair, had explained his situation. He didn't make excuses. He just stated the facts of his work schedule, his voice low with apology. Miss Albright had listened patiently, her gaze kind. She looked over at Leo, who was quietly drawing at a nearby table. "He can stay with me," she had said, her voice simple and clear. "I'm usually here until 5:30 anyway, grading papers and prepping for the next day. It's no trouble at all. He's a wonderful boy." Styx had been floored. He tried to offer her money, but she gently refused. "Don't be silly," she'd said. "We look out for each other here. Just get here when you can, safely." So began the routine. Every day at 5:15, Styx would pull his roaring Harley-Davidson into the now empty school parking lot. The sound of his engine was an alien thunder in the quiet afternoon. He would swing his leg over the seat, his heavy boots crunching on the asphalt, and walk towards the lone classroom with its light still glowing. A part of him, the part forged in suspicion and a hard life, waited for the other shoe to drop. He waited for the teacher to get tired of it, to complain, to ask for the money he had offered. But she never did. Instead, he began to see something that shifted the foundation of his understanding. He would pause outside the classroom window before going in, a silent observer in the twilight. He saw that Leo wasn't just sitting in a corner waiting. He was at a desk, right next to Ms. Albright. Some days, she was patiently guiding his finger across a page, helping him sound out difficult words. He saw her share her own apple with him, laughing as Leo took a comically large bite. He saw her notice the small things. She had noticed Leo loved to draw, so she kept a special stack of paper just for him. She noticed he struggled with fractions, so she used Lego bricks from her own son's old collection to make it a game. She wasn't just babysitting, she was teaching, she was nurturing. She was giving his son the one-on-one attention that Styx, in his grief and exhaustion, struggled to provide. He saw the change in Leo. The boy, once reserved and hesitant to talk about school, now chattered endlessly about his day. He talked about the cool science experiment Ms. Albright let him help with, or the funny story she read to him. Leo was blossoming under her care. He was more confident, more joyful. He felt seen. He felt safe. One evening, Styx arrived to find Leo asleep, his head pillowed on his arms at his desk, a half-finished drawing of a dragon beside him. Ms. Albright had draped her own cardigan over his small shoulders to keep him warm. She looked up as Styx entered, a tired but gentle smile on her face. She didn't say anything about him being late. She just put a finger to her lips and helped him gently wake his son. As he carried a sleepy Leo out to the motorcycle, a profound and heavy sense of gratitude settled in his soul. This woman was a port in the storm for his boy. She was an anchor. He also started noticing other things, details his trained eye couldn't miss. He saw the duct tape holding together the strap of her tote bag. He saw the deep tread wear on the tires of her beat-up sedan, the kind of wear that was a blowout waiting to happen. He heard her on the phone one day as he approached the classroom, her voice hushed and stressed, talking to someone about a student loan payment. He saw the fatigue in her eyes, a deep-seated weariness that her bright smile couldn't always hide. He saw a woman who gave everything she had to the children in her care, leaving nothing for herself. She was pouring from a cup that was dangerously close to being empty. The signal, the moment that turned his gratitude from a feeling into a mission, came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Leo ran out to the bike, clutching a piece of paper, his face beaming. "Dad, look what I made!" he shouted over the idling engine. Styx took the drawing. It wasn't one of Leo's usual motorcycles or superheroes. It was a picture of 3 people under a crudely drawn but vibrant rainbow. On the left was a large, bearded figure in a leather vest, clearly him. On the right was a smiling woman with brown hair, Ms. Albright. And in the middle, holding both of their hands, was a small, happy boy. Underneath, in wobbly letters, Leo had written, "My family." Styx stared at the drawing, and the engine noise, the rain, the entire world seemed to fade away. His throat grew tight. His son, his quiet, lonely son, felt so safe and so loved by this teacher that he had included her in the most sacred space in his heart. She wasn't just a teacher, she was family. The blood in his veins, which had so often run hot with anger or cold with grief, now ran with a fierce, unwavering purpose. This debt could not be repaid with a simple thank you card. This kindness could not be acknowledged with a gift certificate. This, he realized, was a matter of honor. It was a matter for the Iron Heralds. That night, he called an emergency church meeting at the clubhouse. The clubhouse was the Herald's sanctuary, a place that smelled of old leather, motor oil, and freedom. The walls were covered in photos of past rides, fallen brothers, and years of shared history. When Styx called a meeting like this, it was never taken lightly. His brothers assembled. There was Grizz, the club's vice president, a man whose gentle demeanor belied his massive frame. There was Sledge, the sergeant-at-arms, a former Army Ranger whose gaze missed nothing, and Preacher, the club chaplain, who had found God on the open road and could quote scripture and engine specs with equal fluency. Dozens of them, men from all walks of life, sat around the heavy wooden table, their attention fixed on their president. Styx didn't pace or shout. He stood at the head of the table, Leo's drawing held carefully in his hand. He laid it flat for all to see. He told them everything. He spoke of his struggle after Sarah died, of his fear of failing Leo. His voice, usually a commanding rumble, was quiet, raw with a vulnerability his men had rarely seen. He told them about the 2-hour gap, the anxiety, the guilt. And then he told them about Ms. Albright. He described her patience, her kindness, the way she stayed late without complaint. He told them about the snacks she bought with her own money, the cardigans she draped over his sleeping son, the way she made Leo feel safe enough to draw this picture. "She's a civilian," Styx said, his voice growing stronger. "She has no stake in our world. She doesn't know I'm a herald. She just saw a kid who needed help, and she helped him. She's been standing watch over one of our own. She's been protecting the son of your president." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet room. "Her car is falling apart," he continued, his voice now hard as iron. "Her shoes are worn through. She's worried about money. She gives everything to those kids and keeps nothing for herself. We do not let that stand. The world might not see what she does, but we see it. The Iron Heralds see it." A low murmur went through the room, a growl of agreement. "Teacher Appreciation Day is next Tuesday," Styx declared. "We are going to show this woman what appreciation looks like. We are going to show that school and that whole town what happens when someone shows kindness to our family." Grizz was the first to speak. "What do you need, Prez?" The question opened the floodgates. The energy in the room shifted from quiet respect to explosive enthusiasm. It was no longer Styx's mission, it was theirs. Sledge stood up. "My brother-in-law owns a tire shop. She'll have a new set of Michelins on the house." Another member, a contractor named Hammer, chimed in. "My wife loves that teacher. Says she's the best they've ever had. Let's pass the boot. I'll start with 500. Preacher, who had been listening intently, smiled. "The boys from the South chapter owe us a favor. I'll make a call. This isn't just a chapter issue. This is a family matter." The idea snowballed, growing bigger and more ambitious with every suggestion. It wasn't just about tires anymore. It was about a full tune-up for her car. It was about gift cards for groceries, for gas, for clothes. It was about a massive collection of school supplies to stock her classroom for years. And it was about cash. Cold, hard cash. Enough to relieve the pressure that was dimming her light. Over the next few days, the word spread like wildfire through the motorcycle community. Calls were made, favors were called in. Chapters from 3 neighboring counties pledged their support. The number of riders committed to the cause grew from 30 to 50, then to over 100. They were mechanics, veterans, lawyers, and laborers, all united by a simple code. You protect those who protect our own. They became a silent, leather-clad army, mobilizing for an operation of overwhelming gratitude. They weren't just going to thank her, they were going to change her life. The morning of Teacher Appreciation Day dawned cool and bright. For Miss Albright, it was just another Tuesday. She woke up tired, her mind already running through lesson plans and the stack of essays she needed to grade. She put on a simple dress, packed her lunch, and grabbed the tote bag with the taped-up strap. Her car sputtered to life on the 3rd try, a familiar, worrying sound. As she drove to school, she mentally calculated her budget, wondering if she could afford to get the engine checked before it died completely. Teacher Appreciation Day, in her experience, usually meant a few handmade cards and maybe a wilted flower from a student's garden, gestures she cherished, but that did little to ease the burdens of her life. At 7:45 a.m., the first sound began. It was a distant, low rumble, like far-off thunder on a clear day. Inside Northwood Elementary, a few teachers paused, glancing out the windows. The sound grew steadily louder, deeper, a vibration that seemed to travel up from the pavement and into the walls of the school itself. It was no longer thunder, it was an earthquake. Kids, just arriving, stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes wide. Parents in the drop-off line rolled down their windows, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. The school principal, Mr. Henderson, hurried out the front doors, his tie already slightly askew. Then they saw it. Cresting the hill at the end of the street was a wave of chrome and steel. It wasn't 1 or 2 motorcycles. It was a river of them, flowing in a perfectly organized 2x2 formation. The sound was deafening, a glorious, terrifying roar of 150 V-twin engines firing in unison. The sun glinted off polished handlebars and gleaming fenders, creating a dazzling, intimidating spectacle. The procession turned into the school parking lot, the lead rider directing them with subtle hand signals. They filled the lot methodically, parking in neat diagonal rows that took up nearly every available space. The engines cut out one by one, the sudden silence almost as shocking as the noise had been. At the very front, a man dismounted from a massive black Harley. It was Styx. He wore his full Iron Herald's vest, the club's insignia displayed proudly on his back. In one powerful tattooed hand, he held a single, perfect red rose. Ms. Albright, who had just parked her sputtering sedan at the far end of the lot, watched the scene unfold with a sense of surreal disbelief. She saw the army of bikers, the sea of leather and denim. Her first thought was fear. Was there a fight? Was the school in danger? She saw Mr. Henderson standing frozen near the entrance, his face pale. Then she saw Leo. He was standing proudly next to Styx, wearing a tiny, custom-made vest that matched his father's. He was beaming. The bikers began to move with practiced efficiency. Several men, led by Sledge, converged on Ms. Albright's car. They didn't ask for her keys. They simply got to work, a floor jack appearing as if from nowhere. Other bikers began unloading boxes from saddlebags and a support truck that had pulled in behind them. They carried boxes of paper, crayons, books, and science kits. They carried heavy-duty bags filled with groceries. Styx gave a nod to Grizz, who approached the bewildered principal. "We're here for Miss Albright," Grizz said, his voice calm and respectful. "It's Teacher Appreciation Day." Mr. Henderson, still processing the sight of 150 bikers taking over his school, could only nod dumbly. Styx started walking towards the school entrance. As he did, the bikers moved, forming two long, silent lines, creating a clear path from the front door of the school to where he stood. It was a gauntlet of honor. Grizz gently spoke to the principal again. "We would be honored if you would escort Miss Albright out to meet us." Someone found Miss Albright near her car, her hand over her mouth in shock. A fellow teacher took her by the arm. I think this is for you," she whispered, her own eyes wide with awe. Numbly, Ms. Albright allowed herself to be led to the school's entrance, where Mr. Henderson was waiting. He offered her his arm, his composure slowly returning. "Well, Jennifer," he said, a small, amazed smile playing on his lips. "It seems you have some admirers." She took his arm, and they began to walk. She stepped out into the bright morning sun and into the pathway created by the silent bikers. As she passed, each man, grizzled and tough, removed his sunglasses. They nodded their heads in a gesture of profound respect. There were no catcalls, no leers, no intimidating glares. There was only a quiet, powerful reverence. She saw their faces, weathered by the road and by life, and in their eyes she saw gratitude. She walked the long path, the silence broken only by the click of her worn-out shoes on the pavement. Her heart was pounding, not with fear, but with an emotion she couldn't name. It felt like being seen, truly seen, for the first time. She finally reached the end of the line, where Styx was waiting. He stood before her, the hulking president of a notorious motorcycle club, looking as nervous as a boy at his first dance. Leo ran forward and hugged her leg tightly, looking up at her with pure adoration. Styx held out the single red rose. "Miss Albright," he began, his voice a low, respectful rumble. We don't have the right words. Thank you. Thank you for seeing my boy. Thank you for keeping him safe." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the image of the big man in front of her. She took the rose, her hand trembling. I was just doing my job," she whispered, the words feeling utterly inadequate. "No, ma'am," Styx said, shaking his head. "You were being kind. There's a difference." He then gestured to Preacher, who stepped forward holding a large, unsealed envelope. "The brothers and sisters from our community wanted to show their appreciation," Styx said, "for everything you do. Not just for Leo, but for all the kids." He handed her the envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside wasn't a card. It was a check. She unfolded it, and her breath caught in her throat. The number written on the line was staggering. It was more money than she made in a year. It was enough to pay off her student loans entirely. It was enough to buy a new car. It was enough to breathe. A sob escaped her lips, a raw, ragged sound of disbelief and relief. The carefully constructed dam of her composure broke, and tears streamed down her face. These were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of overwhelming, crushing gratitude. The weight she had been carrying on her shoulders for years, the constant grinding pressure of debt and worry, simply vanished in that instant. She looked from the check to Styx, her vision swimming. I can't accept this," she stammered. "Yes, you can," Styx said gently but firmly. "It is a debt of honor. You looked after our family. We look after ours." Just then, Sledge walked over, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Your car's ready, ma'am," he announced. 4 new tires, oil change, full tune-up. Should run like a top now." He dropped her keys into her hand. Other bikers approached and began loading her newly serviced car with the boxes of groceries and the mountain of school supplies, filling the trunk and the back seat. Mr. Henderson, who had been watching from the side, stepped forward, his own eyes glistening. He put a hand on Miss Albright's shoulder. "Jennifer," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "in 25 years as an educator, I have never seen anything like this. Thank you for reminding us all what a difference one great teacher can make." The other teachers and staff had gathered, and they burst into spontaneous applause. The sound was joined by the cheers of the students watching from the windows. Ms. Albright stood in the middle of it all, clutching a rose and a check, her face wet with tears, surrounded by an army of leather-clad angels. She looked at Styx, at little Leo, and at the faces of all the bikers who had come here for her. "Thank you," she said, her voice finally clear and strong. "Thank you for seeing me." 1 year later, a reliable blue sedan pulled into the Northwood Elementary parking lot. Ms. Jennifer Albright stepped out, looking rested and radiant. The tired lines around her eyes were gone, replaced by a calm confidence. The money from the Iron Heralds had, as promised, changed her life. She had paid off every penny of her student debt and made a down payment on a small condo near the school, freeing her from the tyranny of rent. The daily grind of financial worry was gone, and in its place was a profound sense of peace. But the gift had done more than that. It had reignited her passion. Freed from the constant stress, she had poured her energy back into her work with renewed vigor. With a portion of the remaining funds and a matching grant from the school district inspired by her story, she had established the Northwood After-School Hub, a free tutoring and enrichment program for any student who needed a safe place to learn and grow after the bell rang. As she walked towards the school, a familiar rumble echoed down the street. This time, it wasn't 150 bikes, but just one. Styx pulled up, with a 9-year-old Leo riding on the back, his small vest now a little snug. They had a small, brightly wrapped gift in their hands. It had become their own personal tradition. "Happy Teacher Appreciation Day, Miss Albright," Leo chirped, handing her the present. "Thank you, Leo," she said, her smile brilliant as she hugged him. She looked at Styx, a deep and abiding friendship having formed between the teacher and the biker president. They were an unlikely pair, but they were bound by a shared love for the little boy standing between them. The Iron Heralds had been changed by that day too. The story had spread through the town, altering the public perception of the club. They were no longer just the scary bikers on the edge of town. They were guardians, a force for good. Inspired by the outcome, Styx had formalized their efforts. They established the Albright Award, an annual grant funded by a massive yearly charity ride, given to a teacher in the county who demonstrated extraordinary dedication in the face of personal hardship. Their act of kindness had become a legacy. Styx watched as Ms. Albright laughed at something Leo said, her head thrown back in genuine joy. He thought about the simple choice she had made a year ago, the choice to be kind, to offer a safe harbor to a little boy without asking for anything in return. He had spent his life believing strength was about leather, steel, and a willingness to fight. But she had taught him, and all of his brothers, a different kind of strength. It was the quiet strength of compassion. It was proof that a single act of kindness isn't a drop in the ocean. It is a stone that, when cast with a pure heart, can create a tidal wave of goodness, lifting everyone it touches and changing the shoreline forever. It was a lesson that the world often forgets. You don't need a cape to be a hero. Sometimes, all you need is an open heart, a quiet classroom, and the willingness to see a child who needs you. And sometimes the angels who recognize that heroism don't have wings at all. They have engines that shake the ground and hearts as big as the open road.